welcome along. It's another episode of A Blind Insight with me, Simon Hill, and my debating partner, Billy Slateman. How are we doing?
Yeah, not too bad, Loads of stuff going on at the moment because the shop will be open soon down in Merrill.
Yes, that's
the radio shop.
I read about it. It sounds like an exciting addition to the...
Yeah, I think we've got to the point now where everything's ready, bar manning it. So if there's anybody out
bodies,
there, anybody out there who fancies doing a few hours in the shop, then just get in touch.
So that'll be see how that pans out anyway. But it'll should connect the sort of the station with the locals more.
It'll certainly raise the profile. There's all the radio logo and everything all over the place, and eventually we'll bring radio merchandise into it as well.
Yeah,
we've sort of actually taken over all of the stock of the hub as it was, but slowly we can start introducing stuff that's purely concerned with the radio, which will be great. We'll have performances in there, we'll have community groups in there, we'll do cheese and wine stuff, so it'll become like a community hub rather than just a shop. But it's early stages, so we'll have to see how we go.
Well, it sounds like it's your domain, as it were, so you can, within reason, do what you want, so you can try a few things, see what works and what's popular.
I think that's it. It's just a case of suck it and see how you get on, and but the important thing is you got to have enough bodies to open it, haven't you? So,
as always.
We're getting there slowly, so we'll see how we get on.
Okay. Well, today, obviously the hour will no doubt fly by, but amongst some tunes I've picked out a bit last minute today, but we've got them. But quite a bit's happened really in the last few weeks. I'm going to talk a bit about the sad events of losing Liam Payne. And the thoughts the things that got me thinking about, regardless of whatever the actual circumstances were. But for me, there's a broader issue, which we'll talk about. Also, I couldn't really avoid it, but it has been the budget. But don't worry, I'm not going to bore you for an hour or so. It'll just be my version of it, which will only take a few minutes. And then amongst it all, there was a sad situation, really, but ultimately the reaction to it, and in the beginning, and certainly since more information was brought out, has really blown my mind. So I'll be getting that off my chest later on. So yeah, a bit of a somber topic, but again, and obviously with the local touch, as it were. I mean, I didn't personally know of anybody who had any connections with Liam, and I certainly can't claim to have followed One Direction in any way, shape or form, but he was a local lad and an Albion fan, and and so on. So I thought it something to be voiced. And yeah, I mean, for me, it just got me thinking about the issue, which has come to light several times really, and then it sort of disappears again until something like this happens again, which is that in this day and age of reality TV shows of all sorts, whether it's showing off a talent for singing or whatever, or getting yourself locked up in a house for a few months, or in the jungle, or all this stuff, whatever it may be, and there's loads that I don't even know about, I'm sure, out there, but the point is that there's young people. I mean, the case of Liam, I believe he was 16 or maybe even a bit younger to start with. But
yeah, I think he was actually 14 when he first auditioned, and from what I read in the paper, that they told him to come back in a couple of years when he was, when he'd grown up a bit. So he went back when he was 16, and then obviously the story evolves from there, doesn't it?
Yeah. But I mean, it got me thinking that at the end of the day, these are young kids, and that and he's not the only one. There's many others. But they're not old enough to do so many things. They're not an adult by law, but yet they go there with excitement, or presumably wanting to, whatever drives, or whether it's just they want a singing career, or they just want to be famous or be on telly, whatever it may be. But the point remains that they are going out there to be putting themselves up to be shot at, basically. In terms of the world, and scrutiny. It's not like in the old days where, if criticism would only reach you if somebody said it to your face, or via a letter if they could be bothered to send one, or nowadays it's you're minding your own business, but if they get hold of your social media account, it's right there, or and it just got me thinking that I don't feel that the people who put them out there to be scrutinised, i.e. the Simon Cowells, the well, I can't remember whoever does it nowadays, but it used to be Sharon Osbourne, Louis Walsh, all these people, they're obviously old hands. They're used to being in the spotlight, and they evidently manage, or don't let it bother them, whichever it may be. But are they really preparing these youngsters for what they're letting themselves in for? Yes, of course, it's great. You go there, you win a contest. And you think, your dreams are coming true. But equally, at what cost? And it's very. I just think more needs to be done to protect them, and there needs to be more responsibility taken by the people that put them in the spotlight, because while they take their cut of, they don't do it out of the goodness of their hearts. Let's face it, they do it for a share of the money they make, and they can choose to be in the spotlight or not if they wish, but they're the ones that go out there performing, creating records.
You do hear some weird stories, don't you, of people who have gone through that system. I mean, I think it was, what was her name? Rebecca Ferguson, who's another one. And she pulled, I mean, she was slightly older than Liam, but she pulled away because of all the manipulation of, dictating what she wore, where she went, what she did, what she could record, what she couldn't record. And of course, I think as the talent blossoms in a way, and she began to write her own stuff, and it was like, well, you're not going to be able to do that with us. So she literally pulled herself away, got out of the contract, did nothing because he blocked her doing anything for years, and she's only recently started to come back because the period of his control, or anybody in that position's control, has gone. And it's just immense pressure. I always wonder, I mean, it seemed that Liam Payne came from a really strong family background, and it makes you wonder, in a way, were they blinded by him becoming popular? How much his parents were kept away from having any say at all in his life? Because I'm sure they seem the sort of people, if they weren't happy with something that was, going on, they'd say, hang on a minute, but is it that they almost sign a clause to say they give their son over to Simon Cowell, or an agent like Simon Cowell, and all the parental power has gone away from them? It just seems weird.
They hold so much power, or they at least must seem like they hold. I mean, they must look and think, if I upset this person or don't do as they want, then that's my career over before it started, or whatever. Or so they almost have that power to like you say, manipulate or get them to do what they want. And it seems like they portray it as our talent contest and everything, but ultimately when they see there's a bit of talent there, but they still then don't want you to just blossom and do as you please under their guidance. They want to mould you into what they think will be good for them as well. Like I say, they're not doing it for nothing.
Yeah.
And like you say, it's just interesting. Makes you wonder, the families, what say do they have, or is it the case of they're chasing their dreams, they just become.
You very often, I mean, not only with that, but in sport, you very often think, well, is the child living the dream that the parents wanted? You know what I mean? And
I've always wondered, what if they say, I'm not sure I like this anymore, and they would say, oh, no, you know what I mean? They get egged on by other people who like the fact that they are, what they are or what they're doing, so they get egged on, or they maybe feel they can't step away because they feel like, or they're made to feel, they'll be letting people down, or it can be a vicious circle in that respect.
It's a massive responsibility, and I would imagine that being in the system. I mean, we just done a special on Black Country Extra. Greg Stokes has just passed away. He did a programme on here, and Greg was caught in the blood transfusion scandal, and it's caught up with him. He's passed away. Greg grew up with Lenny Henry, and I think it was last year, he did an interview with Lenny Henry because they grew up, I think it was Greg and two other of his mates were Lenny's mates, and they used to look after him when he was a kid. He was a black kid, they were white kids down the Buffrey. And it's a really interesting interview in relation to this, really, because Lenny talks about how when he started to get successful and he moved away from the black country, he was a black lad on his own in London, and he was 17 years of age. And he said, and I had to become a different person, to be part of the showbiz. And he says, and I understood that it wasn't me, but I had to change in order to get on. And he said, and it was like a relief to come back home and see Greg and my mates and all that. And he says, and I know I'm a different person than I was then, and I've been lucky enough to get where I am. And I suppose that happens to these young kids, doesn't it? Liam's not, or the others aren't turned against the family, but it's very easy to be blinded by everything that's going on and saying, don't worry, we'll look after you, come to here, we'll send you to this part. It becomes part and parcel of the life, doesn't it?
Well, dare I say, I'm loath to use the word, but a kind of a cult, or a,
very similar.
You're roped in, you're made to fit, in that zone, in that world, if you like. You're made to fit. You're a star. You're made to feel like, do what we tell you, and you'll have everything you want. And of course, you go around the world, you have some amazing experiences, but it's all, unfortunately, I think the part that isn't necessarily explained or thought about is that it can all be over very quick. And then what? It's the thing of filling that void. And you hear so many stories. I mean, football is, the struggle after retirement because of filling that void. And the thing of going from stardom. And for some people it lasts a lifetime, doesn't it? But other people, it's a few years or a few months, and it's once you've and I've experienced it to a tiny extent with with blind football. I went going from playing for your country and appearing at a Paralympics to then suddenly you feel like nobody again, and it's very 1 minute it seems everybody wants a piece of you and people are interested in you, but then if you're not doing what you think, well, they're not really interested in you the person, it's what you're doing, as it were. And once you're not doing that anymore, they're not interested, and so suddenly you then, okay, well, what now? It's almost like what you did before doesn't matter, and it's very, and and I mean, time and time again, I mean, we hear they go down the path of of certain things that to help them cope with it, and that of course can escalate and get out of hand, and then before you know it, it's just a whole mess of emotions, and they're not themselves anymore because they're fueled by by other things, and
he did say in an interview, didn't he? He said, look, he says, when you're going all over the world, he says, everybody thinks it's fantastic. He says, but all you see at the inside of hotel rooms, because you're not let out, he said. And if there's a fridge there and it's full of drink, what do you do? He says, you drink it. Well, and then that escalates, and then you become dependent on the drink, and then other things happen. So he was quite and he has been quite open about his struggles, really. And you don't know the circumstances of his fall, but you sort of get that sense of desperation, don't you? That they're caught in this web, this net, and they just can't get out.
No, and whichever way they do, like I say, whether it's within their own, and like you'd hope that people, within his family or their loved ones would say to him, look, it doesn't matter. Yes, you've had your time. You've made your money. If you've had enough, drop
just
it.
Get out of it.
No one's going to take your money off you. No one's going to. You'll still be. And then if you want to, you can pursue something else. Your name's still your name, and people will still know who you are. But you just.
I think as well, because they were part of that band and they were massively successful. It must be really difficult to adjust to
life without it is
and that you're not as successful as a solo artist. That must be absolutely incredible to deal with. You fully expect that you're going to live off the back of your success before, and it
just
didn't happen, did he? I mean, I know he obviously had a great lifestyle, but he never had any major success as a solo artist, and that must be really difficult to deal with. Not only him, the rest in the band, really.
Or again, of course, it's only natural that if others that when you do have some success, you then start feeling, inadequate compared to them, and all these things start piling in, and it's just, and again, sometimes, and I guess maybe I don't know. It'd be interesting to look back in time and see how many, if you start off as a solo artist, then what that you're used to, being just you, as it were. Whereas if you start off in a group and that was, a huge success, and then you try and follow it up, and it's nothing against you as an individual, but if you were one cog of that successful machine, then trying to suddenly do it on your own has got to be a big change, and B, like I say, if it doesn't go well or go to plan, a massive, very difficult to swallow, and
at that level, it ain't like you can go into, for argument's sake, Black Country Mental Health. You're a young lad round here, and you go in and you want some help. You don't feel as though there's anybody you can talk to, because you're on that pedestal, aren't you? It's really, really difficult. Really difficult. And such a tragedy.
So, budget, well, depending when you list, well, this will be Friday, so the budget took place on Wednesday. As I say, I haven't had a chance to scrutinise it in detail, as we're recording this on Wednesday tea time, but I'm not going to go into their version of events anyway, because I think, to be honest, it can be pretty easily summed up in a much quicker and much more direct method, which is that basically, I always think, the budget it's like rearranging the dust, or doing your spring cleaning at home. You put, you mess about, you do it all, but deep down that ultimately in the end, you're just 5 minutes late, or a day later, it's going to look like you haven't done anything, and you're back, and it's just nothing really changes. And so there've been so many rumours, so much talk. They tweak this, they tweak that. So they want the NHS is failing. Well, what's new? So they'll throw in another however many billion into that, and then come next year it'll still be failing, and they'll still not have enough money. So they'll throw a few more billion in, and so on it goes. One thing I did spot having a quick read on my way here was, unless I misread it, I'm pretty sure it said 500 million for potholes. I mean,
what, they've allowed 500 million?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean, that's pretty staggering to me.
But then local councils have got no money to mend the potholes anyway, have they? So,
well, this is and this is where, and again, we're sitting here currently with, on our patch, Dudley Council, having people in to assess, how they've lost their money, and obviously Birmingham Council down the road. I heard a cracking quote as well the other day, which made me laugh. So they've got these, whatever they want to call them, auditors or managers gone in to sort of see how they've managed to lose all this money, and they've identified something like 800 million. I'm sure it was.
Really?
Said, for Birmingham. I mean, how? But anyway, and so then the council said it's an ongoing they're looking into. I think. Sorry, so you didn't notice, unless you lost all this overnight. This has happened over a number of years, and you didn't notice that you were losing such huge amounts of money. It's just beyond me. But yeah, so they'll plough more money into them, and then but instead of doing what it's meant to before, it'll be. I mean, frankly, the CEO or whatever he wants to call himself of. I don't know about Dudley, but certainly of Birmingham Council, he's still got his job.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
The front just is incredible. The ship's basically sunk on your watch, and you're still standing there trying to blame everybody else. I mean, it's just, yeah. But
and you think, do they? well, are they going to give the cars up? Are they going to give this up? Are they going to give it? No, because they'll be all right.
Well, their salaries haven't been cut, have they? They'll, and then of course that's the other thing. They'll get rid, especially now if the minimum wage is going up. So that'll be another reason that they'll say, oh no, we can't afford. So they'll trim the workforce, and then they'll realise, oh well, actually we're all sat here in council towers, but there's no one out there to use this 500 million to fill the potholes. So we may as well pay each other with it, whatever they do. So that'll go on, and then.
I mean, there were a couple of businessmen on the radio, and they were saying we won't. All it does to us is we'll stop employing people because we can't afford to employ them anymore.
Well, it's twofold, isn't it? They'll stop employing people, and it always blows my mind how I've never heard one single chancellor ever say or admit that yeah, sure, you can put the wage up to whatever you want. But where does that money come from? The government don't subsidise the businesses to pay the wages. The businesses have to find the money to pay them. So therefore, they charge more for whatever it is they offer. Hence, things cost more, and hence the wage increase isn't felt because everything goes up.
Yeah.
And so it's just on it goes. But no one ever seems to say this.
Yeah, the one guy was saying, I had plans to expand. He said, but now I've got to rethink because of all the extra costs that I've got. It'll be a struggle to keep the first business that I've got here. So the plans that I had for expansion have got to be on hold until I know how I can survive with all the new rules that have come in, and that's across the board. And then everybody else has just got to learn to tighten the belts, and then you see. The gap between them that have and them that have not is just wider and wider, isn't it?
Well, that, and like I say, because ultimately but again, so that they want to raise the taxes or try and, whatever frankly, I think they make it up as they go along. Frankly, I don't think anybody knows what. It's not like a bank account. You look at your bank account and it says what it says.
Yeah.
They come up with these figures. Where on earth they get them from? And who knows? But it's all myths and rubbish anyway. Because we're billions or probably trillions in debt. I can't remember what it is off the top of my head, but so we're always in debt, and we always will be in debt because. And now all they've done is they've changed the rules, whatever that means, so they can borrow some more. And
it just goes right. Well, you can't concern yourself with finance at that level. Because A, you don't understand how it works, as you say, and B, if you did, the stress you put yourself under would just be absolutely phenomenal. And you just think, well, how does the world exist? Borrowing and giving and borrowing and giving. And what actually happens to them? Oh, we're just going to give £2 billion to so-and-so, and you go, well, where's that come from?
When you said where's it gone? At the end of the, so they've, however many billion they've given again to the NHS, which is nothing new. They talk about like the NHS has been given nothing for, it gets billions every year, and yet it's never any better off. But there's no accountability because at the end of the day, it's public money. They don't. The difference between businesses and the sort of people you've just been mentioning, they have to find the money. They have to make the money. If they don't get the money, they can't do it. And if that means they have to sack somebody, then even if it makes no sense, but if they can't afford to pay the wages, they can't employ them. And
exactly.
But then the public money, which is being dished out now to the councils. The NHS, as it always is, that money isn't. It's just free money, or that's how they see it. They haven't had to. The businesses or the organisations haven't had to make it work. They haven't got a books they have to balance because you do not lose hundreds of £1 million overnight. That's years of poor decisions and wastefulness, and that's what we do as a country. We just waste money left, right, and centre. And no one ever ultimately carries the can for it, and it just goes on and on and on, and every budget they tweak this, move this up, move that down, take from Peter to give to Paul, and round and round and round, and ultimately then the next one comes along and we're still having the same debates because they just.
And on a global level, almost all the countries are exactly the same, and you sort of sit back and think, well, how is the world existing if everybody is in the same state as we are? It doesn't really add up, does it? You think, well, if you're all in trouble, why hasn't everything collapsed?
Well, it's IOUs, favours, and I don't know. It's a bit like Monopoly, I suppose. It's just this fake bank that, I mean, in our case, the Bank of England, but then the Europe Bank or whatever. Each country has their own. But you just think it's almost like we've run out of money. Oh, we'll just whack an extra, few billion on the overdraft. So
Yes.
it never actually makes any sense or never adds up. And of course, and we're doing all this to the minimum wage increasing and everything. That's fine, but equally, there's, as I experience now on a daily basis. So I know now it's not me making it up. It's in front of my face, and you can see it for ourselves. In this country, we've never mind giving people who are working a higher wage. We've got to do something to nip in the bud the ever rapidly growing list of people, which is in the millions, by the way, of people who aren't working and have got no intention of working, and they're getting, and it doesn't, and it's like growth. They keep talking about growth and spending this, but it doesn't matter how much money you want to throw at something if the country and the population is gradually over time becoming lazier, less productive. You're not going to make people work because they don't want to. And then, I mean, and another interesting one that I can't wait to hear is the case that keeps being made about, let's say we want to have a 3-day working week because that'll be more productive. I mean, someone please explain that one to me. But so hang on a minute then. You keep talking about wages aren't high enough. So are you still going to be expected to be paid for 5 days?
And just work through it.
Because if you cut down to 3 days, you don't have to be a genius of maths to work out you're going to be even worse off financially. But that doesn't seem to be worrying them.
It changes people. I mean, we're not of a generation, or we're 2 generations on, maybe 3 now, of a generation that work the rags off, on 12-hour shifts in factories, and that's completely gone. And a lot of it is, and I always say this, a lot of it is our what would you call it? A culture that we've inherited because because we came through the wars, and it's like, well, we don't have to do it because we won the wars. That don't wipe anymore, does it? In a way.
Well,
I don't want to be a bus conductor because I won the war. Yeah. Oh, that's all right then. We'll have this West Indian bloke to do it, and they go, hang on a minute, I ain't got a job. Yeah. Well, you didn't want to do that one.
Well, what skills have you got? Yeah. Well, none really. But of course, I mean, I heard something, at one point which absolutely, made me internally combust. But someone said about, oh well, now we've been through COVID, we've been through the war. I was like, oh my Lord. So
I think that, the King was great in Australia because they were giving him a ribbon, and he said, look, we cannot change the past. All we can do is learn from it. But unfortunately, in modern society, we ain't learned anything from the past. We ain't learned work ethic, a moral ethic, a value ethic. We've just not learned it.
But the thing, and that's, that was going to be my final line, to say that in the end, none of it really matters, because once we buckle down to what the Commonwealth want, we'll have nothing left anyway. So we'll all be out on the streets and all be begging. So, but the point is that history's history.
Yeah.
No one alive can do anything about it. But why does it come down to money? What is money going to do about it?
Yeah.
It's not going to compensate the people that suffered.
No.
It always gets on my nerves when people try to almost live off the suffering. If they find someone in their ancestry suffered, they seem to feel that that's them that needs to be the redemption. It's just nonsense. It's just.
You can't change it. You learn from it. That's the whole point, really. I think. Completely.
Well, but and the point that seems to always get missed is that, whatever wrongs Britain has done over the years, they were the leader in terms of bringing it to a stop. And so nothing can be undone, but it was stopped. And let's face it, it's still going on in one form or another in various parts of the world, but not here. So, it's...
And that has nothing to do with us.
Well, exactly, we blame for that as well. It's just...
Yeah.
It's just so... They've latched on to this, and it's only become really noisy in the last sort of five years or so. But it's like someone's got, oh, yes, we can grab onto this and we can... but, I mean, let's throw another element in. We broke ourselves fighting the war, so if we hadn't done that, if we'd have, so I think, in the end, if you look through history as a whole and look at what everybody's done and the rights and wrongs or whatever and weigh it all up, to come out with these figures of you owe us, so many trillion or whatever, is just absolutely, but I fear, and I genuinely fear that we're going to give in to it. And
possibly. Yeah, you're probably right.
Where will that leave us is what worries me. Well, just finally, as I mentioned, I need to get something off my chest this week, so it's time for this.
What in the name of sanity?
My safe space when something absolutely blows my mind, Victor Meldrew. But in this instance, it was the issue of when the sad state of affairs when the police officer, I forget his name off the top of my head now, I apologise, but he was cleared of murdering the gentleman in London, and then came out that the gentleman wasn't as innocent as had been made out by family and people that knew him, and of course it had sparked all sorts of protests about innocent people, police brutality, and all the rest of it, all sorts of chaos. But now it turns out that not only was he up to no good, he was a long-standing gangster, a criminal record as long as your arm, for stabbing people, attacking people, and even days before he was sadly killed, he'd shot somebody.
Yeah, there's some video of him shooting somebody in a nightclub, isn't there?
and yet his family then, even now, are saying we feel aggrieved. He was, we've been, we feel a great injustice. All the rest of it. I'm sorry. So to your moral compass, then, it's not acceptable for him to be shot, but it's quite all right for him to go around sticking bullets in people.
Yeah.
I mean, you just couldn't make it up. And they're on telly saying this stuff, It's not rumours, or I thought it was made up, but then they show them on video that they're actually making the speech to the camera that, we feel very aggrieved and this is wrong, Chris was a good man, a father to be. So you're a father to be and you're going around risking getting... I mean, if you play with guns, the chances are you're going to get yourself shot.
Yeah, and you're liable to go to prison, so a child that isn't born yet is not going to have a father there when he's growing up. It was just farcical. In the end, it was farcical. I think it was incredible. It was incredible the way they kept everything back, almost like, okay, then have your say, because we've got all this in the pan, and we're gonna. I mean, I know legally they couldn't do it. No. They couldn't.
But can you imagine how hard it must have been for the officer?
Oh, God,
because he would have known.
Yeah.
He knew why they were there. He knew what they were. Why they were arresting him or trying to arrest him, and all this time he was trying
to ram them while they were trying to arrest him.
He didn't even stop then. He was still trying to escape.
He was trying to back on one and squash him against the car, and the other one jumped on top of another car to get out the way.
And this links. I mean, again, it annoys me in a way because it's all gone quiet about the fracas at Manchester Airport a few months back. I know it all got sort of overshadowed by the awful events in Southport, but the principles are saying that these were people who confronted with not just police officers but armed police officers and are still trying to fight their way out.
Yeah.
Now I'm sorry, but if you're doing nothing wrong, if police officers with a gun surround you, you don't try and escape. do you? You just
No.
don't.
And it's like the guy that's just lamped that chap, the MP up north, and he feels as though it's right because he reported it the next day. He reported it the next day because he knew he was going to be in trouble because it was
It's been
filmed.
videoed and
Yeah.
obtained witnesses.
And at first, I didn't realise it because I only heard it on the radio. But when the chap who I know said, "Oh yeah, the bloke had got his hands in his pockets and he literally just smacked him one in the face," well, obviously you're going to get in trouble for that, isn't it? But it's probably phoned, and whoever it is, his advisor, and go, "Well, if I were you, I'd tell the police what you've done."
Well, better to get your saying first rather than
Yeah. But it was a bit too late in the end. But it is farcical the way things, I suppose, develop, and then it comes to pass that. But the people that do the protests don't feel as they've got red faces or anything. They're quite genuine about feeling aggrieved by it all, don't they? But they must have known what he was like anyway.
Well, the ones close to him, but then the other ones. But then it's worrying how people get swept along in these things without knowing anything about the. You know what I mean? They don't know the story. They don't know. They just jump on the bandwagon and they do not know the facts of. I mean, as an outsider looking at it, you'd think, oh, well. You'd hope that the action the police took was, justified or was a last resort, blah, but, you don't jump on the back and say, oh, he was innocent. But how do you know?
Yeah.
You've got no idea what this guy was up to.
And how was it? I mean, I would imagine if he was a gangland boss and like he was pretty wealthy as such, so they're obviously living off his wealth. And so they must know it. So how have you got the gall to defend somebody like that and say, he was this, put him up on this pedestal and say what a lovely bloke of the community he was. Yet he was, because he was probably dealing, with drugs and whatever, and making his money that way.
But like I said, more concerningly, their moral, they didn't have to say anything. They could have just quietly, privately, sort of said, well, we warned him. If that's the crowd you run with, but no, absolutely. Adamant that he was,
There's no reference, was there, to his life?
No, absolutely adamant. He was wrong. He was absolutely, shot in cold blood. No excuse. The police just randomly picked him out and, gunned him down. No reason, and they clearly believe what they're saying. That's the bit that blows my mind. How do you convince yourself of this fictional version of a situation? It's. I mean, I wish I could do it, but I just, it's amazing. It really is.
Yeah, it's such a well. But the thing is, it's not a common story. It happens all the time, doesn't it? Where you hear one side of the story, and then you get the further information, and you think, well, hang on a minute, there's something else going on here that they either prefer not to know about or do know about, and it completely blasé about it.
But unless he was absolutely brilliant at leading a double life, you cannot tell me that if he had whoever he was having his child with, or whether it was partner, wife, whoever, all these people that they mix with, that they had no idea. And like you say, if there's money involved, they quite happily live off the money. They might not ask where it comes from, but that's not an excuse in my book. You've got a good idea where it comes from, even if you don't, want to look at it. Maybe
they protest because they know it's going to dry up, doesn't it? The source of income. You've got about a minute left.
All right. Yeah, well, there we go then. And my thoughts, you may think I'm talking rubbish, you may agree with me, but let me know. By all means, email me, simonhill_6@hotmail.com, or comment on the podcast page or on Facebook, or whichever you prefer. But we'll see you next time.